à tous. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue au Pavilion du Canada à la COP15 et merci de vous rejoindre à nous aujourd'hui. Je m'appelle Lauren Small et je suis la directrice du Pavillon du Canada pour l'Environnement et Changement Committee Canada. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Canada Pavilion at COP15 and thank you for joining us today. My name is Lauren Small and I'm the director of the Canada Pavilion with Environment and Climate Change Canada. Before we start, just a reminder for everybody to please put their phones on mute, including panelists who sometimes forget. Cette session sera diffusée et enregistrée, so this session will be recorded as well as live streamed as well. So it is actually a real pleasure for me, and I'll tell you why in a minute, for me to introduce our first event of the day, Innavik Leading the Way to a Clean Energy Future, hosted by Concordia University and Indigenous Clean Energy. C'est avec plaisir que je vous présente notre premier événement ce matin. Innavik, ouvrir la voie à un avenir d'énergie propre organisé par l'Université Concordia et Indigenous Clean Energy. This film screening and panel discussion will be hosted by Aphrodite Salas, Director of the Graduate Diploma Program and Assistant Professor at the Department of Journalism at Concordia University. We talked a little bit about full circle moments happening quite a bit during COP, and Aphrodite and I went to school together and did our graduate degrees in the Masters of Public Policy and Public Administration at Concordia University. So super excited to see Aphrodite after all these years, and Aphrodite's been a trailblazer in quite many ways and working in journalism as well as now returning and teaching. She's always was a great colleague at school, so super excited. I'm not surprised that you're part of this panel, this wonderful esteemed panel of speakers this morning. Aphrodite Salas is the director of the Graduate Diploma Program and Assistant Professor in the Department of Journalism at Concordia University. Her research interests include collaborative and conciliatory models of visual journalism, media and reconciliation, and the decolonization of journalism education. The Atagotaaluk project is part of Aphrodite's SSHRC-funded research in conciliatory journalism practices, all focused on highlighting climate leadership with the Indigenous Clean Energy social enterprise. Concordia University Journalists for Human Rights and media partner CTV Montreal. Please join me in welcoming Aphrodite.
Thank you so much, Lauren. It is just wonderful to be here, to see you across the stage, to be joined by my wonderful partners, two students, and just to be experiencing this. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, and just before we begin with our film screening, I wanted to note that Palais de Congrès, of course, is situated on the unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, and I've been a guest on this territory for about 20 years since Lauren and I were at university together, and my ancestors are from a different land, another land, from the southern part of Greece, close to Sparta in the Peloponnese. So my parents came to Turtle Island in the 60s, but they were forever connected to their homeland, and growing up they taught me to feel the same way. So I feel that I can understand what it feels to be connected to a land and to its people, because my parents gave me that growing up. And so I'd like to thank the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation for allowing me to build a life here and to be a guest on this land. And so, of course, this has all influenced the work that I do at Concordia University on decolonizing our journalism curriculum and on respecting Indigenous perspectives in journalism and the media. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our wonderful panel and our project to you today, which is all about climate leadership in Inukjuak, Nunavik, that will be a first in the Canadian Arctic, the almost 100% replacement of diesel for heat and power. This is unprecedented and incredible. So I'll begin by introducing the panel finally, Sarah Lisa Kasudluak. To my left is the current president of the Pituvik Landholding Corporation, a not-for-profit that was incorporated in 1979. Pituvik holds title to 521 square kilometers on lands that classify as Category 1, an inspirational leader who has a strong vision for her people. Sarah Lisa is the first female president in Pituvik history, and she joins me here on this panel from Inukjuak-Nunavik. Woo! Eric Atagotaaluk was first elected board member of Pituvik in 1997, and he was appointed president of the corporation in 2002. He was one of the very first to start thinking about renewable energy possibilities for Inukjuak, really a trailblazer, as you'll see in the documentary. And he was there when discussions around the Innavik hydro project started back in 2008. Innavik is the focus of our short film, and as you'll see, it will reduce greenhouse gases and tackle climate change by shifting away from diesel. Chris Henderson, on the far left, is the founding executive director of the Indigenous Clean Energy social enterprise and the president of Lumos Energy. He's also known as the godfather of clean energy. Yes, it's true. For the past 35 years, Chris has led and been at the forefront of groundbreaking Canadian enterprises and local national businesses, social and ecological initiatives which have global impact and resonance. He is a trusted and insightful commentator on accelerating energy transition to a low carbon and more competitive energy future. Honored to be on this panel with you, Chris. Luca Caruso-Moro, right in the middle, is a multimedia journalist living and working in Montreal for CTV. As a student, he has been part of a series of Indigenous clean energy projects being documented by Concordia Journalism. And the Innavik project in particular, he contributed as a videographer, editor, producer, and web designer. His reporting and his filmmaking have also been recognized with awards from TIFF and other film festivals. And I remember 5 years ago, Luca was in my class, first year journalism, back of the class to the left. I'll never forget. So happy that you're here and that you've come on this journey with me for so many years from the beginning. And Kaaria Quash is a soon-to-be graduated graduate student, freelance journalist, and independent filmmaker with interests in climate change, science, wildlife, and Indigenous affairs. The Innavik Multimedia Project is actually part of Kaaria's thesis, which focuses on climate change reporting, Indigenous territories, with a focus on documentary storytelling, and I've just read it, and it is outstanding. So happy to be here with all of you. We're all going to talk after the film, but we are here to share a story, so let's get to it. We'll roll the film, please.
Akaroni tau sa likitani tamani lakud. Kamayutsu ta tamakuninga nunani, tamakuninga imangni. Avati talimat iloni tuinak kasi itong nahaksimaw. Salumay tuit uksualut tutut ikumaliutit ikumatitsibut ikumani. Ukuyut sisutilu iluyuatini. Kisiani uksualuk salumay litiriyok anang nisarmi, sirmimik imangmilo. Taman na nukahulak tavut, taman na lo asi itulang alaksugu.
So here we have our 500-gallon tank, which heats our homes. Sometimes we run out of fuel. We don't have any heat in our homes sometimes for a day or two. Even if there's a small spill, you can smell it in the whole, in the whole house. So even inside in the house, sometimes there's fuel spills and there's leaks. Sometimes the tanks are so old that they start to rust, and they start to have leaks around these places, around the bottom ends here, and that's where it starts to leak, and that's where it's very dangerous. All of our communities right now, we're all dependent on diesel. We use about 3 million liters of diesel every year. The recreation center, the hospital here, the local clinic, it's a constant risk.
Uksualuttunek miliagasakjuanik aniok kaisugubuk puyuklunik akkaagutamaat. Kubuyuhang ni pallu nuna imalu suqqataw makigunna sutik. Nuna illimaat nikitsahutingit suqqataw tillugit. Imak nuna vimmi sikuirmat kisiani. Uksualuttaw tiit umiakjuat uksualumik takkaleaut igunna sisuut. Akituyualuk salumaittu sunilu attanakunna sunilu.
That to me is a constant risk when we're looking at fuel delivery. There's been thousands of liters spilled, in the past few years.
2015 13,000 kalluti tungatanut kuviyo kalawyo uksualummi tamani inutruami. Sirmi mo kalawyo sukunakto tatsisuni nunami ang iyoalummi. Tuwakayak daw lakitsuni halunanulo aulatitaw gaya kalakitsuni igiyak tusugo. Taikanit senak akkagumi 14,000 kalluti tungatanut uksualummi kuviyo kalawyummiyok ivuyivimmi. 3,000 gaya late kalluti kuvimmi tillugit salluni.
This is the pipe where the ship connects on the shore, and this pipe leads to the tank farm where all the fuel and gas is delivered. If those tanks are out of diesel before the end of the year, we have no other resource to get additional diesel. It's the only way to ship it to our community is by ship. So between July and October, that's when the ships start coming in. And if they don't make it by that time, we're stuck with no diesel. It was never delivered. With a small community like ours, how do we find ways to no longer depend on diesel? It's a huge challenge. We kind of thought about that. What are our options? Why not renewable energy? Inukjuak is fortunate enough to have a river where it has continuous flow, and that will allow us to reduce the amount of diesel that we use for our community.
Isumatakayaw yumut biyak viliutikak simayo.
The natural flow was to the left.
125 million talakak tumik akikalangatiligu pinasuakatikakutaw sitsuni. Siwulipat siyamik ikumautiliutaw sitsuni kumi simituinikut kupaitakangani. Tamatumaw pinasutaw ninga at sakaktaw utilik innavimik. Inutitut Innavik tukilik ipiarawapiutsuni urakaktalik ikisautimik tingawajanilyo.
It's very impressive. Until you get to see it in real life, the impact, the visual impact is very impressive.
It's the first project that is getting built so far in the north. And be the first one building a structure like that in the north, yes, I'm very happy. Challenge is the location of this project. There is no road access. So to have all your equipment and material to do the construction, you need to bring it with barge boats. So it is a very complicated logistic. Season for construction is very, very small. So you have to fight with the nature.
Nunakatita ilanginnut tamanna nunaw piusuksukusinganik asit ituinik isumaluguti ukatatok. Amisunik sausuta tamatuminga pinaswakto yumik angik simagalwak tiluta. Kinguvaki tigut tamatuminga nunamik ungumatsisimayugut asit ituktaw lang malo isumalun nangik kayang ito.
With hydropower, we're manipulating the river. We're putting stuff in the river that hasn't been there before, and that's what some of the community members are struggling to accept.
Will the fish get sick? Will the water be drinkable? Is it safe?
Will the community be flooded? I mean, my ancestors been here for a very long time and they've relied on the water for food and sustenance, so it's really important.
Pinaswak daw lang ayok pigalaw tinagu awi sa katalaw yugut nunamik imang milo akago ni talimaw yok takasani. Sukwa tirigo mangimut. Ikaluit kukut mayo katalutik sito katakon ng inalaktut. Suvayak vigun na tuilo nutaat niruto naksamik ni kinaswak vigun na niaksutik annaw mavigun na naksaulutilo.
The community requested that we test the water every day just to make sure that the quality is not being impacted by all the construction activity up here. The water quality looks normal according to the measurements so far, which is a very good indication.
Ilitaksimat siya tugu taman na imaktavi hatta si magatigo inuutit samik akago kasakjuani amisuni. Taga-tagalino-tanik pivit sa takbiyon na sa kunaktok uwat tino. Kup simito taw ni nga piyarikpat sa lumayumik ikumaliwot ako nalalaktugot inut rami. Niyokuti hat talugulog ingumay ngitavot ikumautik kupaikut ikumaniatik kong inyo. Kinaw yait miyalikita at nuigun na sila ang mata pinasukat sa tigot-tigot inilo nuitirigot taulotik inokutit tinualing alanga yun.
In our community, we have the highest rate of unemployment, and I think we're the second highest population in Innavik. So with that, we can start making jobs that are for our people.
That will help us come up with programs to support our community priorities, not in just economic development, for social growth and for skills enhancements.
For me, I'm very proud of this project. We'll be selling our electricity to Hydro Quebec, and all the profits will go back to the community.
That's very important, to have Inuit-led management, Inuit-led projects, because, if it was Hydro-Quebec, I'm not sure that they would be sensitive to, the community issues.
I think the world is ready for that change. Like 10, 15 years ago, nobody was ready for it. So I think our timing is kind of perfect for the world to follow our change. One of the big things I always dream about is a healing center. I think that would be a good way to bring back many of our traditions that we had lost.
I think it's very important for an Inuit-led project like this to start from the bottom up, to have the community lead the project. We have plans to develop programs, develop, our community to become trainers, teachers, carpenters, electricians, mechanics.
I see my people standing on their own 2 feet, working on their identity, on their culture, and themselves.
Thank you so much for, there's Simeone. Simeone Simeoni was the mayor of Inukjuak, and we interviewed him while we were there. Sadly, he passed away a few months afterwards, and we created a separate documentary in his own words that is also on the CTV Montreal website, all about the history of Inukjuak and his perspectives. So we dedicated the film to him. And on that note, I'd like to hand things over to Sarah Lisa.
Should I go there or here? Maybe if I'm here, it's better. So you got to see my hometown, and we're 1,800 people. We're not a big community. We're in a remote community, only accessible by airplane and ship, boats. And first, I'd like to talk about my community. And you know everyone. Everybody knows you. You can't hide in your community. And it's very small. And everybody's close together. And when there's someone new, we always get curious. We want to get to know people. And with this project, it's been a big change for the community. We've been dealing with a lot of decolonization, which we didn't really expect to go through, but it's a process that we need to go through to be able to take back our identity, our strength, and to be able to be leading our community to a better future. And this project, big part of it is why I'm working on it is so that my children can have the future that I didn't have. They can have the opportunities in my hometown and have them for their future and their children. For myself, I had to leave in order to pursue my education. And that's one of the things I would like to see, that we can get everything at home without leaving. And the biggest part of it is we have a bad history we need to address. And with this project, with the funds that we'll be getting, this is going to be a major tool for us to take back and heal from the wounds that my ancestors has gone through, and which is very recent. It wasn't not long ago. When I was growing up, that's when settlements were starting to really settle. It's new for us to be in communities because we were nomadic. We followed the animals, we followed the season. And the major part, like I said in the documentary, I want to see a healing center that's based on our culture so that we can be able to shine through who we are, where we come from, and with the funds, we'll be able to bring programs in for us, by us, for us. And it's been an honor to actually be working with everybody, all the partnerships, all the connections, I've met so many people since we started working with everyone. And the key thing is the partnerships, the connection. We need to have that. We need to have the family aspect in order to get this project done. And it's been nice to get to know people from all over the world, and we are very similar. And so I'm forgetting. Where was I? The other pic. Oh yeah, and with these, will be receiving millions of dollars, which is, I've been always saying, since the fur traders came, since the whalers came, since we had the first contact with Halunat, all the resources has been taken away. It's for the gain of someone else. From our lands, and it was profited elsewhere, and it was never profited to us. This is the first time that we are getting our own resources and gaining it for ourselves. This is a modern way for us to be able to be sustainable, which we have been for thousands of years. This is the most modern way to be Inuk. How we used to be Inuk. We are resourceful, we don't waste anything. So this is the most modern way to be Inuk, is to gain the resources from where we're from and bring it back to the community. And with this is gonna be the first time the funds will stay in the community. And that is gonna be something that I wanna see right away. And also, and for this project, it's in the Arctic. We're totally off-grid, so it's a very special project. And for us to be leading the way, it's been interesting to see where people are at and people are watching. And so I'll say lastly, the part that I'm excited for the most is for my community to go through healing. And that is something that we'll need to go through even if we don't want to go through it. It's a process that we'll be able to do with our own way. And so with this project, it's gonna give us the strength to do what we want to do. Thank you.
So I just want to touch a little bit upon the journalism as well as my experiences filming up in Inukjuak. So I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago, which is an island in the Caribbean. So it's very different from the climate in Inukjuak. And like it took a bit of adjustment for me, especially like the first day we got there was a snowstorm. It was like 90 kilometer per hour winds. So it was pretty cold. So it took a while to adjust to the climate, but it was definitely a novel experience. When it comes to environmental journalism, it's been specifically criticized for its narrow framing, especially like focusing on conflict style reporting. And so what we tried to do in this documentary, we employed a method of journalism called conciliatory journalism, which aims to ease, it doesn't focus as much on conflict, it aims to ease social tensions rather. And so it was interesting to try this out. And yeah, so what you saw there was an employment of that method. I think it's also important to point out that in doing this journalism, it required a lot of collaboration, much more than I'm used to in other forms of journalism. We needed the full support of the community to be able to completely create and form the story. And rather than us telling this is not us telling the story of the people in Inukjuak, rather, we have been privileged enough to share their story. And so the amount of collaboration that it took to get to where we were at is just, something that was interesting to work in. And again, just the experience of being in Inukjuak, as Sarah Lisa said, it's a small, tight-knit community, and I saw many similarities with the community that I grew up in the Caribbean. And so it was just nice to be able to draw those similarities. I'll pass it on to Luca.
Yeah, I'll keep my comments quite brief. Just to say, I think it's been such an excellent experience for me learning this craft. Aphrodite, I think you're one of few or the only journalism professor that I'm aware of that is engaged in this kind of work, which I think is so important because we have a group of young journalists, this generation that Kaaria and I are a part of, who have a responsibility, I think, as we move into a new context of a changing climate to highlight projects, initiatives that seek to address it, which seek to address the needs at a local level, and I think that that's exactly what has happened in Inukjuak with the leadership of these fine people that I'm sitting next to. I suppose the only other thing that I will add is, for those of us who have been following or attending the conference up to now, we're entering our final days here. There's been a lot of talk about Indigenous collaboration, Indigenous leadership in climate initiatives. And for me, at least, I think this is a pretty bang-on example of what that can look like. So those are my thoughts. And hopefully some of you have similar thoughts with regards to this project as we all wrap up the conference, hopefully with new plans and new ideas about how to support and work with local communities in our respective homes. So thank you all very much.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank Aphrodite and her team for taking the interest to make a documentary on this project that we've been working on. It's been a long time in the planning. I'll just briefly talk about how it all started and where we're at and our hopes for coming from this project. We did consider other sources of renewable energy before we actually considered hydro energy, because hydro energy had a very bad reputation around our region, just because of the fact that La Grande project down in La Grande has had we've heard some negative impacts on the environment, on the river, and on the fish habitat. So that was our only, I guess, source of information when we consider hydro energy. And we knew that it was going to be a challenge for our community members to actually consider hydro energy. So we had to come up with an approach where, as a board, we wanted to involve the community members as much as we can throughout the whole process of the study, and try and educate ourselves and our community at the same time, and learn about hydro electricity, and in our case, run of the river, and how a responsible project could have a positive impact for a community like ours. And I think we were trying to share as much information as we could throughout the whole study. And I think that made it easier for our communities to accept. And the fact that we were going to be owners of the project made it even easier for our community members to say, okay, let's think about this. Maybe it could be good for our community. And right now we're in the final stages of the construction stage. It was a 3-year construction schedule. We're in the 3rd year. We were hoping to complete the project by end of this year, and then when construction started, COVID happened. That provided additional delays for the construction. So we're hoping to finalize the construction of the project hopefully by summer of next year, and have it operational by then. When we started considering hydroelectricity, that was in 2008. It took a 10-year process to come up to the stage we're at now. Just because of the fact we're a small community, a small corporation with very little financial resources, how to develop a project. That's why we had to bring in developers that had experience and the financial resources to realize the project. And we're very grateful to have the partners that we have. And for Hydro-Quebec, who's going to remain the utility corporation, having the confidence in our team to make it happen and come up with a power purchase agreement to make it a bankable project. And I think we've been very fortunate that we've had a strong support from all the the people around us, not just from our community, from our partners, for the stakeholders in the project, which is the utility corporation. And I just want to mention that when we started considering renewable energy, we had no clue how to develop and what it requires, what are the financial requirements. And that's when we were introduced to Chris Henderson when we attended our first renewable energy conference. I believe it was in Toronto. That's when we met you for the first time, and he's been pretty much guiding us throughout the whole process from A to Z, and I don't think we'd be here today without Chris's guidance throughout this project. Thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Eric. It's my honor to be here with my colleagues from this panel, from the community from Inuit, from Concordia University, and all of you here in this room and through live streaming through a global audience. As Eric mentioned, I have had the privilege and honor to being advisor to the Pitavik Landholding Corporation for 15 years as we've developed this project. And along the way, we have learned many things. What I would say to you is that why is the Innavik story relevant to a biodiversity conference? Why is it relevant to tell the story of clean energy? Because if we're going to get to a true clean energy net zero future, it has to meet three tests. It has to meet the test of a just transition. And as Sarah Lisa expressed, it has to be just for local communities, and in this case for an Inuit community, and in fact all indigenous communities on Turtle Island and around the world. It has to be clean in terms of offsetting fossil fuels, and you've heard Aphrodite talk to the fact that almost all diesel fuel will be reduced in this community for heat and power. That's going to reduce almost 40 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions over the next 50 years. That's a huge amount of impact on climate change for a small community. In fact, that is the largest single, not just the largest single reduction of diesel in the country, it's the largest single per capita reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by any Canadian community, period. Think about it for a minute. If you replaced all the power you used from fossil fuels for electricity and transportation even, because you're transporting fuel all the way from Montreal, as the documentary showed, and then you're using it to also replace your heating, which is using diesel. So this project is truly just, it's truly clean, and it's also sustainable ecologically. Because as Eric's noted, this project was not done quickly, it was done slowly. It was done slowly because the community had to have comfort that the right things were being done. It took us 2 or 3 years, Eric, as we went through the planning of the project, talking to the community with information sessions. The number of times we went on the radio call-in shows in English and French and Inuktitut. I found those long translations challenging, but I got to know everybody in the community. They seemed to know my name, my voice. But that allowed the community to say, yes, we want to do this. And in fact, one of the things we did, we used the Canada voting booths to have every person of age to vote for the project. And 82% of the people in the community said, yes, we want to do this project. And along the way, we also designed it right. So Eric, I remember people were really concerned about the caribou. And they said, will the caribou migration be damaged? And we made sure the design of the project wouldn't do that. In fact, one of the advantages with the project is that you can actually cross when it's completed to the other side of the river, to the south side of the river, and maybe that will improve hunting for the local community and the hunters. We made sure that the Arctic char habitats were not going to be ruined in Hudson's Bay. We made sure that the design of the project wouldn't lead to more mercury emissions in the water, and it won't. In fact, upstream of the reservoir for the project, the habitat will be improved because of greater oxygenation, which will improve the biodiversity in the river. The reservoir will not increase flooding. The reservoir is basically at the high level of the spring freshet with a small area in addition. So what is that? Why is that different? Why is that clean energy different? It's different because an indigenous community, an Inuit community, has said, we're at the table, it's our land, as Sarah Lisa expressed, and we have to be there to make sure it's done right. So it's not just protection, it's restoration. Innavik is a restoration of colonial history. It's a restoration of relationships. It's a restoration of what Canada should be. And it's a restoration of the habitat and biodiversity of the region around Inukjuak. And that's what makes it truly unique. For those that are watching on live stream, on this room I see 3 words on a panel here that says ambition, partnership, and implementation. So Innavik is ambition of the community to take land back, to take control back, to make sure that it's not an importation of fossil fuels that has spills throughout the transmission of transport and the storage of fossil fuels. It's ambition for clean energy that leads to economic benefits for the community that has social and economic and ecological benefits. And it's partnerships as well, because the community would never happen, as Eric said, without partnerships. And one of those partnerships, an essential part of this partnership, is telling the story. So the partnership that you see on the podium with you and on live stream around the world is a partnership with Concordia University and the journalism program and conciliatory and collaborative journalism, because it says, can this happen more? And so the partnership is a partnership of the project, but also a partnership of the story that's unfolding. And finally, the last word is on implementation. As Eric says, sometime this summer, the project will start turning electrons from a sustainable resource that's been done ecologically right. And so that's why Innavik is so important. But what you should know, it's not the only place it's being done in Canada. Indigenous communities in Canada are doing this from coast to coast to coast, from the Arctic to the Atlantic to the Pacific, on Turtle Island. Indigenous communities today in Canada own or co-own or have a defined financial benefit with over 20% of Canada's electricity generating infrastructure, almost all of that renewable energy. They are the largest asset owners of renewable energy except for utilities in the country, and growing larger all the time. So Indigenous communities have effectively said, this is our land, this is our ancestral land, this is our territory. We are willing to share it, but it has to be done in the right way. And what you see reflected in the Innavik project and the documentary you viewed is an expression of that. But Innavik is an example of many other projects across Canada. It's one of the first in the north, in the Arctic, that's this large and this impactful. But this is the story that we must embrace. And so the future of clean energy must be a future of biodiversity. The future of clean energy must be a future of just transition. The future of energy must be a story of truly replacing fossil fuels so we have clean energy. And the story of clean energy must be an ecological story that really builds a better world. And Eric, Sarah Lisa, I gotta stop because I'll start crying.
And just one little add-on. The caribou crossed the bridge from the river, so it improved their migration routes.
Well, actually, so I think, Chris, the reason why you almost started tearing up is because, yes, Eric and Sarah Lisa are changing the world for better. That's exactly what we're seeing.
And Chris, I know without you, we wouldn't have made it this far. So your passion and your heart for Indigenous people, and that you want better for them, I thank you for that. Because without you, we wouldn't be here, because we're just a small little community in the north, you know? So thank you for your passion.
But you're not just a small little community in the north, really. You're an incredible community. And you spoke about, just now, you said to Chris, you know, you wouldn't have made it this far. I'd love to hear more about the challenges, like from both of you, Sarah Lisa and Eric, if you can talk about the challenges inherent in making this project a reality over the past, 15 or 20 years.
Well, finding the best solution for our community that's renewable was, first of all, trying to identify that was the challenging part, because we're so far from the main grid of the southern Quebec grid. It's an isolated grid that requires hydro. Our utility corporation has very high standards for quality of service, so we had to find a solution that was that would provide quality of service, reliable throughout the year, even in the wintertime, and able to provide electricity for even our heating sources, because we're converting our diesel heating to electrical heating as well, which is unprecedented within the province of Quebec, at least in an isolated community. That's one of the things that that's very interesting about this project. And we were considering at first wind energy, but the maintenance challenges and the technical challenges, storage for excess energy from wind turbine was too much of a challenge for a small community like ours, and the isolation and the maintenance requirements. So that was a solution that didn't really work for our community, at least. So like I mentioned in the documentary, we were fortunate to have a river that has continuous flow throughout the whole year, even in the wintertime where we need it the most. And I think run-of-the-river hydro was the best solution in our case. But even developing and the planning was also a challenge, just because of the high cost of transportation. The high cost of construction in our community is very high. It's more than 3 times higher, almost 4 times higher compared to a construction cost down in Montreal.
Because you have to basically plan it all out.
Plan it a year in advance.
A year in advance to make sure that the ship can bring everything.
Material, because if we miss a certain material for a certain job, we can't just order and it's going to come the next day. We have to wait for next year for the next ship to come in to be able to make them a forgotten mistake. It can become very costly. So every detail down to the last nail has to be planned. So, and we have to work with people that understand the logistics of transport to our communities. And I think we were fortunate to have an entrepreneur who has experience in working in isolated locations. They were able to plan out, I can say, very effectively for their 3-year. For a small project like this was his 3-year construction schedule, just because of the climate challenges that they have to go through in the wintertime. You can't just work on a hydro project that's iced up, right, in 2, 3, 4 months of the year. So these were one of the challenges that we were facing throughout the planning of this construction. And now, for the financial challenges, we're such a small corporation. I mean, our corporation now has $5 million worth of assets. A small corporation like that working on a $125 million project, that's a challenge. So we had to find in a partner who would able to minimize our financial risk at the same time, and understand our community concerns. And I think we were very fortunate to find a partner who understands our community concerns, which was the environment. Our community members still depend a lot on hunting and fishing. For our daily diet, we still rather have something we caught on the land rather than something we bought from the store. So we're still highly dependent on the animals that we catch from the land. So that's very important to us. We had to be very careful on how we impact the environment and the animals that depend on the river and the actual location of the project. So there were environmental impacts, planning challenges, financial challenges. I mean, name them all. We had to go through them just because of the fact that we're so far off from the grid and isolated from the major cities where all the suppliers and material are not as available as in our community. Try to sum it up.
Yeah, I want to add, Eric, to a part of the challenge we haven't mentioned yet. You know, this is a restorative project, but it's also a project of reconciliation. And reconciliation is not only an Indigenous story, it's a story for all Canadians. And part of the reconciliation of this is that we had to convince governments and Hydro-Quebec to be a part of this. Eric, I don't know how many, it's a good thing we like each other because we spent a lot of our time traveling to Montreal and to Quebec City to meet with Hydro-Quebec, to meet with the government of Quebec to say this project could work. And frankly, for about 10 years, Hydro-Quebec did not believe us. Well, not only do they believe us, now they are the biggest champions because they saw how good this project was. We always knew it was good. And we had to get the Quebec government to do different things. You can't use electric heat in remote communities in Quebec because generating electricity for diesel from the homes is more effective than getting it from a diesel plant. But we had to change the law to be able to do that. The government has done that. As Eric said, we needed to get financial support, and we can say today that we truly appreciate that there is financial support in this project from the governments of Canada and Quebec. But this took 10 or 15 years to get there. I hope that the next projects in northern Quebec, because I know there are other Arctic projects developing in places like Kasudluak and others, that it won't take them that long, because we don't have that long to deal with the climate crisis. And we don't have that long to really deal with biodiversity fairly. And Eric, you mentioned the partner, and we really have to recognize that Intergex, not only Intergex and CRT, the construction partner, but Intergex, the project development partner, and the partner for Pitavik, they walked the talk of reconciliation. They came to the table right away saying this will be an equal partnership. And the decisions made in the project in development, construction, financing, and operations are made where Pitavik is there as an equal partner. And they will not be made otherwise. So the challenge of doing the project was both the project itself, the physical part of the project, but also bringing together the range of people that needed to walk the process of reconciliation in a different way.
And I'll add the community aspect. And the biggest challenge I find is going through oppression, and that's one big thing that we're dealing with. And with that, when the community had many concerns about the impacts that our project is going to have, we had to validate every question. We had to make sure to have the answers. And that was one big challenge when there was a fear in the community. We had to make sure to address everything. We went through all of the topics that they were concerned about. We had the radio show, we had the community consultation, and that was the biggest part, was going through the process of decolonization.
Just to add on that a bit more, since the beginning, we've been saying that we were saying to our community members that we want to own the project. I think community members were having a hard time believing that we would actually own a project that's worth $125 million, because they understand that, first of all, we don't have the money, and it was hard for our community members to actually believe that we would be the project owner. Even when we kept saying that for a good few years, we were still getting questions, who's going to own the project? And we've been saying for 10 years, we will. We're the owners. Community is going to own it. And the question kept coming back, and I couldn't understand why. I mean, you mentioned it a bit. We've been in so much oppression where we haven't been invited to be involved in projects. It's never happened, and that our utility corporation is so big that it was hard for some members to actually believe that we could own this and keep it for ourselves. It was a mental challenge to understand that, to believe that we could be owners even on a project like this.
And now that it's, you're almost there, right? How is the community now? You said that there's been a process, right? There's been a process of kind of acceptance and learning and, understanding. You're about 6 to 8 months in, to the end now. Are people getting excited, or what's the feeling?
Cautiously excited. We keep mentioning that there were fears on water quality. Tommy summed it up very well. We're putting in stuff in our river that's never been there before, and we've always been dependent on this water for so many years, and it's actually our community's water source for the whole community right now. So although our members are starting to understand that, okay, it's going to be ours. The revenues generated are going to come back to the community. But are we still going to be able to drink water? Is still a question that's constantly asked today. So we keep every day monitor water. And so far, up in the 3rd year of construction, water quality has not yet been impacted, gratefully. And we're not expecting to be impacted even when it's completed. So it's going to take, I think, a few more years for some of our members who are seriously concerned about the water quality to actually believe, and they're kind of like, let's wait and see what really happens, kind of an attitude. But overall, it's been, I think the reception is very well received, and people are starting to get excited about, at least, because the more we talk about the future, the more we say, okay, what type of programs do we want to come up with? That's the exciting part that I think the communities are going to really want to be involved in.
And this spring, we'll be planning to consult the community on what kind of programs that we will want for the community. By next year, we'll have the funds to start our programs. So we want to be ready. We want to engage right away so that we can set everything up right away. We don't need to wait. Once the funds are in, we'll be able to start the programs what the community wants. And they're anxiously waiting to do that part. That part, I think, is going to be the bigger process, because that's going to really look down in what we need as a community, what we really need to see for the future. So that's going to be, it's like picking up an old tool we got lost along the way,
And I think the way the power purchase agreement is set up in a way where the community is going to start receiving revenue from coming from the project from its first year of operation, which I think you can emphasize a bit more on that.
Yeah, I mean, the power purchase agreement with Hydro-Quebec sells the power to Hydro-Quebec, who distributes the power to the community, and that receives fees from the project. We pay back the costs of the project, including the money we borrowed, along with Intergex, and then there's a net return that's shared equally between Pitavik and Intergex, and it's not a small amount of money. But one of the things we did when we financed the structure, normally, this project's going to last 40, 50, 60, 80 years. So typically you would see your returns coming over the course of that 40, 60, or 80 years. One of the things we did here, the community, as Sarah Lisa's noted, wants to move forward on new programs now for education, for healthcare, for economic development, and for youth and for elders. And so with Intergex's help, we've structured the financing so the income from the project comes in the first 5 years of operation, the dividends. And that's very significant because, as we all know, especially in the area of inflation, $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow, and certainly more than $1 40 years from now. And so we've structured this so that the resources are coming sooner, so that action can be taken sooner to change the community to meet the needs of Inukjuak. And it's going to be very exciting this spring, Sarah Lisa, as you go forward. And I think there'll be a lot of ideas about what to do with the resources, but that's a good problem to have.
It's a very good problem to have. Absolutely. I'll just say a couple of words and then we'll take some questions from the audience as well. Just a note about, I think many of us have said, we've noted about things taking time and taking the right process. And I realized I didn't actually explain kind of the process that I've been doing with my students. And Luca, actually, I know there's others doing similar work, yes, so I'm not going to take full credit. Tara Tyre out east, Kanina Holmes was with Carleton, now she's in Whitehorse, she was doing something similar, Trish Elliott. But there's a core group of us that are really working to decolonize things in journalism education. And I think what I've been doing is just taking time to build relationships first before any travel happens. So the first time I spoke to Eric would have been in 2019. And we spoke over, well, we actually only got there in 2021. So it was about 2 years. And with the students, in terms of preparation, lots of readings, Truth and Reconciliation Commission final report on media, other work from Duncan McHugh on decolonizing journalism. And also we had our other partner, Journalists for Human Rights, did Indigenous reporting training with Willow Fiddler from the Globe and Mail, who prepared the students before that. Eric also met the students before several times to explain the context of the community. And I have to say, we learned things that we should have learned in high school or in elementary school about our own country and about our own province and what happened. We learned things from Eric that we should have known. And I think that was part of the learning process for all of us. And, it just took great care before we went. And I think it's been a process of building relationships that I hope are going to be long-term. It doesn't end here. Building relationships based on trust and care and humility, and then moving forward together. That's what I'm trying to do with my students on these different projects that we work on with Indigenous Clean Energy in different communities in Canada. So that's kind of the bedrock of it. So we'll take some questions, actually, because we've been having our own little fireside chat up here. So we'll take a few questions from the audience.
Well, there's quite a bit to unpack here. This is incredible. And I have to say, being part of the Canada Pavilion, and a lot of the team members are here, we've been very privileged to listen to a number of exchanges about it, and it's really about empowerment. And, I've been part of, in a number of, over the course of, as a federal public servant for the last 25 years, I've been involved with a number of conversations with Indigenous communities and in my work with Environment Canada, Parks Canada. It's been really important, and it's nothing about us without us. And I think it's really important that the community is empowered to make these decisions. And when you talk about a healing center and using the resources, and then looking back at trust, truth and reconciliation, and we've been hearing a lot of trust and reconciliation now, and it's really building that partnership of trust that's so important. And being a community that's so far from where the decision making takes place in our country, it's really important to have those connections. And I really applaud you for working, through whatever challenges that there were. And then it looks like there's going to be a lot of you're set up for success in your community. So I think that's incredible. And then bringing in the journalism aspect, and it's the ethical part of journalism and decolonization. We're trying to do that through our own storytelling at Parks Canada. as well is that we have to change the narrative. There has to be a shift, and it's really, you know, bringing in the 2 eyes and the 3 eyes, and you know, the way that we've done things in the past. We have to look back, but we have to look towards the future, and we really need to use that very important Indigenous knowledge in the decision making that's made. And I'd like to know a little bit about how you included your elders in the decision making, because we come from a society, in the Western society, where we don't value the elders as we should, and we take from your teachings that are so important. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how the elders perceived the whole project and how they were brought into the decision making. Thank you.
Well, first of all, within our own board, which is the Pituvik Corporation, we have 7 elected board members that get elected every 2 years. And we've always been fortunate. We've always had at least 2 or 3 elders from the community elected to the board, and they were always able to provide guidance for the younger members of the board. And I mean, their advice and guidance was always listened to first. And without the elder support, we would have not had this project accepted. And throughout our community consultations, most of our participants were always elders. And at least the ones that were always there were very supportive of the project. And I think we were fortunate to have the elders that we always tend to them as our guides, because they always provide guidance, whether by practice or through the knowledge that they share within our community. I mean, they're highly regarded to this day. Whenever an elder says something, everyone's going to listen to whatever the elder suggests or recommends or teaches. And they're very active, still very active, even if they're retired from their normal jobs. They still practice traditional hunting and gathering. So whatever knowledge that they share is always taken very highly by the whole community.
I would note too that, I mean, Eric, I remember when we first started planning the project, we would go to the elders for their traditional knowledge about the land. And apart from elders, I'd also note that youth have been involved. The first screening of the Innavik documentary was in the Inuktitut school, because this is a generational project. But Lauren, as you are from Environment, Climate Change Canada and Parks Canada, I want to note something else that's part of the change story. With my leadership with Indigenous Climate, Indigenous Clean Energy, we've also been working now with Environment Canada. And so I would note that the Indigenous Leadership Fund, which is a $180 million fund for supporting climate action through clean energy, which Environment Canada and Climate Change Canada is coordinating, what your department's done is reached out to our organization, and we're making sure that the design of that program, in fact, I was literally dealing with that last night, how the process will work, how the engagement of communities will work, is being informed, is not being done in a classic bureaucratic process. It's being done by ensuring that Indigenous input and leadership comes into this. And so with Inuktitut, the Indigenous elders that are there, the Inuit elders, inform the project, and youth are involved. But to ensure that we have that same effect across the country, it's key that Environment Climate Change Canada also does that. And I'm delighted to say that your colleagues in the department, as they're designing the Indigenous Leadership Fund, are doing exactly that. This is the story we have to write. We together have to write what is truly the Canada that was and can be and should be.
And also, when the project was starting, I wasn't in it yet, but there are a few elders that have passed away since then that were the key supporters of the project. They're the ones that had a vision for their community, and they were the ones that would speak on our local radio, because our local radio is not like here. It's a central information center, basically, and everybody tunes in. When there's a hot topic, everybody calls in. So there are key elders that had passed away, and it would have been nice for them to see the project. And I think Eric always shares that he would have liked them to see where we're at today. We still have some of them. My grandfather is one of them. He used to be a board member. He's a very active 85-year-old. He drives his car, Skidoo, Honda, and when he has something to say, he'll go on the radio and let us know. So they are very active.
Also, if you noticed at the end of the film, Simeone Simeoni, who we dedicated the film to, I have to tell you, it was the most humbling and wonderful experience to sit with him. Luca and I did the interview, and I can't even really call it an interview because Eric dropped us off. So Eric said, we were driving around. Eric was like, okay, Simeone's going to talk to you now. And so Luca and I were thinking, we were going to have, typical go in, set up the camera, do the interview. He welcomed us in. We sat down. We started filming, and he had a story he wanted to tell us about his community, about his life, and about his vision. And it wasn't an interview. It was his voice. And it was a gift because we felt honored to be sitting there and listening to this incredible man and the stories he was telling us and the perspective he was telling us. So it was really just a gift, I think, that we then were able to share. Alicina Lukturuk, who is Simeone's wife, did the translation for the film. And she was with us when we went on the community radio as well. And I'll never, ever forget that moment of sitting in Simeone's office and being lucky enough to listen to this man who started off by saying, my name is Simeone Simeoni and I was born in an igloo, and telling us what he told us, which is in the documentary.
Well, if I can just add, because when he welcomed us in and spoke the story that he wanted to tell us, there wasn't really a time for us to ask him about the hydro project, which is what we expected to talk to him about. And so as we went through the editing process, we thought, okay, well, we can try and work him in, and we want to honor his voice because he's so respected within the community. And as we did that, I think that the issues that we came upon was he presented this story as a complete piece. And if we were to integrate it into the story, we would have to chop it down, which is not fair to his testimony and not fair to his intention. So if anyone is wondering what we're talking about, he did not make it into the film, that interview. It lives separately, and I'll plug the website here. If you're interested in watching it, ctvnewsmontreal.ca. You can just look up CTV Montreal Inukjuak. It'll be the first thing that comes up. And you can see we prepared his interview to stand alone, edited simply for clarity, and it exists there on its own. So, and it's quite something. So I encourage everyone who's interested to check it out.
And Alice, I showed it to her before to make sure, and Eric and Sarah Lisa, just to make sure that it was okay. And with her blessing, it's on the CTV Montreal website, and with her blessing, we screened alongside the Innavik documentary at the high school. That was, like Chris said, the first showing was in the community, with the community. And it was, so the question about elders is, I feel like I've learned so much through this process, and just will be very, very grateful to continue learning alongside this amazing community.
Still have some time. So, hello, Sean Marshall, Departmental Science Advisor, also at Environment and Climate Change Canada. So thank you, foremost, for sharing this. It's just what we need right now in the world and in Canada. It's the positive, we'll do. Thank you. So yeah, thank you for sharing this wonderful, beautiful film, amazing project. beautiful vision for the Healing Center. I have to say I've been in lots of negotiations over the past few days, and they're necessary and slow and painful, sometimes acrimonious process. And as a scientist, not as representing my department, I have to say sometimes I'm feeling like we don't have time for all of this because we need this action now on the ground. And this is exactly what you've presented, a really positive story that's bringing social justice, it's bringing economy, it's bringing the kinds of change we need in terms of emissions reduction. So it's nicely told in your film. I look forward to part 2 when the power gets turned on and the diesel generator gets shut off and the silence that falls over the community associated with that. So that's going to be a very exciting time, hopefully next summer. And it's going to be lots of, I think, example from this for the country of the kinds of climate action that we need to see. So thank you for that. Maybe lots of questions about the project itself, but we can talk about those after. But one I had was actually around you'd mentioned selling the extra power back to Quebec Hydro. And I guess in the summer months especially, there'll be a lot of surplus energy created from this project. But since you're off grid, I was wondering how the extra energy could be going back and what the ideas are for that. And as you were speaking, and I was thinking of hydrogen-powered snowmobiles in the community and the eventual ships that serve the community being off of sources of energy like that, where this could be an amazing opportunity for some of that extra power in the summer months. But I'm sure you've got visions and plans. I'm curious to hear how that will look.
Well, the power that we have in the project is good for 40 to 50 years. So we had to build a project for more power than we need today because the community does grow. There are new houses every year. And so we actually have enough power as the cost of transitioning into electric-based transportation comes down. And in fact, I know that the Innavik board has also said, how can we look at electric vehicles? How do we look at electric snow machines, electric quads and ATVs, and even electric marine boats? That will be part of that transition. And so not even in the summer, but also in the winter, Sean, there is the ability to make that transition. So we will see that happening as the costs of that come down in terms of, and the supply of those technologies become more available. And they are coming on the market more and more. And then I would also note that we'll probably see energy storage come into the picture in about 20 to 30 years as the community grows and needs more power in the wintertime in certain periods. So the beauty of the project allows us to grow with those needs over time.
And also, what we also think about was there was a project that we were working on, but it kind of fell off, was a greenhouse. And we do have a small hydroponic container, but we for sure will need to get a greenhouse going so that everything can be grown locally and sold at the stores. So we have ideas, and biggest one is the vehicles. And I think to make the community totally off gasoline, for sure, like to go hunting, we'll still need to use our gas machines because when you go hunting, it's unpredictable. But we have some ideas. We haven't really dived into them yet, but we have a vision for them.
Sarah Lisa, could I ask you to share something that you shared last night when we got together, and that you said when we do the project that you want to have a symposium in Inukjuak about clean energy in the Arctic. Could you share what you were thinking?
About the project?
About the symposium in terms of inviting others to learn?
Yes. So since we're starting to know more about the project, what we've gone through and all that, so we decided to start, let's start to have the first Arctic Clean Energy Symposium in our community. And so we're starting to get that going. That's one of the reasons why I came here, to get some support in funding and try to get people to be on the project. And because a lot of our communities are very small, and I want to give those communities the chance to understand what we've gone through in a shorter time and for them to gain right away. So we want to invite the communities to learn about our project and see from step A to Z, and even the possibilities of inviting people that are working on electric vehicles or students that are changing how to convert an engine to a gas engine to an electric engine. Like, the sky's the limit, basically. And because it's literally just taking back how Inuit are resourceful and just using it in a modern way, not wasting anything, reusing everything, and it's gain for the community.
I love that. Any other questions?
There we go. Sorry, not quite sure how the mic works, but hi, my name's Cameron. Thank you so much for such a wonderful and insightful panel. I'm feeling very honored to be sharing the space with all of you today, so thank you so much for, thank you. Thank you so much for all of your time and knowledge. I come from Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where unfortunately we do have a long history of hydro projects not being done the right way, so again, I'm feeling very honored to being given a little hope through this panel. But I'm very interested in the community-based environmental monitoring that kind of went in with this project. I would love to hear a little more about that and kind of the water monitoring process, as well as if there is plans for like community-based environmental monitoring after the project kind of comes into fruition and hydroelectricity starts kind of flowing in. So I'd love to hear about that.
It was actually the community members' request that we make sure that, first of all, it's not impacted. So we have to do a profile before the actual construction stage. We did a lot of profiling. We did a lot of surveys on the fish habitat, the fish population on the project site. We did water quality testing to provide profiles, how the water state is at its current state and post construction. So we have a monitoring plan on the fish population. We will continue to monitor them. We will also continue monitoring the water quality as well, just to make sure that it's not being impacted in a negative way. And we've received researchers from a university from Montreal that have interest in also studying if there's any methyl mercury that's being produced by the project. So they've already installed some measuring devices that will allow them to monitor the water quality above stream as well as downstream throughout the process, and this will continue for the next 7 years. And the fish monitoring will continue to monitor for the next 15 years, which is in the plan. But I think if the community wishes to, we'll want to continue this monitoring program to continue even after 50 years. That's the plan that we have so far.
And also, we had the opportunity to start with a baseline. And so before everything was started, they started doing research, taking all the data in before it all started. And then when construction started, and even after, I think they even added more years to add, just so that they can have the right information, because it is the first, I think, in the Arctic for them to really study closely like that.
Let me also give you a bit of hope about Treaty 1 territory. First of all, the truth you expressed is the truth. The hydro projects in Manitoba were not done with due regard for ecology or just transition and Indigenous rights. But I can tell you that the Manitoba government is now thinking about how to do that differently, and they're on the cusp to issue net zero framework early in the new year, which I think is much more progressive and much more respectful of Indigenous rights and inclusion. I would also note that a very good friend of Aphrodite and mine, Darryl Brown, is working on a project in a remote community in northern Manitoba to reduce reliance on diesel through solar power. And finally, I would note that in one of our programs in Indigenous Clean Energy, which is called the 2020 Catalyst Program, we train Indigenous people to be champions for clean energy. Eric was a mentor in the program this summer. And one of the first year's programs, there was a woman who came through it by the name of Chantel Henderson, not a relation, but someone in Manitoba. And 2 weeks ago, she became the first clean energy advisor for the Manitoba Chiefs. So to me, what you were speaking for was truth, also asking the very real question on how the Innavik project is being monitored scientifically and for the environment. But in order to get to the change, we have to have leadership, and sometimes one has to push. So I would strongly urge you to push, but I do see also in Manitoba some changes occurring which are very positive, and this is what will get us to where we need to get to.
On that note, I think our time is coming to a close. I just want to say thank you, Nakurmik, not only to Sarah Lisa, Eric, our Indigenous partners, Inuit climate leaders in Inukjuak, of course, Indigenous Clean Energy, Chris Henderson, without which this partnership wouldn't have even happened. Our first conversations in 2017 or 2018, I can't even remember. Luca, Caruso-Moro, Kaaria, Quash, incredible journalists on their way as well. And the rest of our partners, Concordia University, Journalists for Human Rights, CTV Montreal. And yes, I think together we are stronger. And I'm hopeful for change. So thank you. Nakurmik.